Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Book summary. Preface. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, emerged from a remarkable moment in literary history in the summer of 1816. While she stayed near Lake Geneva with Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, John Polidori, and Claire Clairmont, incessant rain confined them indoors. Byron proposed they each write a ghost story. Mary, then only 19, initially struggled to conceive an idea, until a waking dream one night gave her the vision of the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put toge. This became the seed of Frankenstein, first published anonymously in 1818. Shelley's introduction explains her aim to express both the thrill and terror of human ambition, a philosophical horror that examined what happens when man's pursuit of knowledge overreaches moral bounds. Letters 1 to 4. The framing narrative. The novel begins with a series of letters written by Robert Walton to his sister, Margaret Saville, in England. This epistolary frame establishes a narrative within a narrative, grounding the extraordinary events that follow in realism. Letter 1, dated December 11th in an unspecified year of the 18th century, introduces Walton's expedition to the North Pole. A man of ambition and curiosity, he seeks to tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man and to discover the secret of the magnet. His tone mixes scientific zeal with romantic yearning. Yet, even as he glorifies his enterprise, he confides his loneliness. He longs for a friend who would understand his soul and share his dreams. Letter to March 28th. The following year shows the strain of isolation. The sea is harsh, the crew coarse, and Walton admits that he bitterly feels the want of a friend. Still, his passion for exploration outweighs fear. I would rather die than return shamefully. By letter 3, July 7th, the expedition has reached further north than any before, and Walton writes with almost naive confidence in the power of man. The tone is triumphant, yet the reader, already alert to Gothic irony, senses hubris foreshadowing downfall. Letter 4 marks a dramatic turn. Walton's ship becomes trapped in ice. Through the fog, the sailors glimpse a being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, crossing the ice on a dogsled. The next day, they rescue a nearly frozen man, a European, drifting on a sledge himself. This man, Victor Frankenstein, is near death, but when he hears of the gigantic figure the crew had seen, he becomes agitated. Gradually he and Walton form a friendship. Walton, finally finding the companion he longed for, admires Victor's intellect and intensity. But Victor warns him that unchecked ambition can bring ruin. He offers to tell his story as a warning against how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge. His tale becomes the core of the novel. Chapters 1 to 2, Childhood and Early Influences. Victor's story begins in Geneva, Switzerland, within a family of affection and wealth. His father, Alphonse Frankenstein, is a man of integrity, who rescues a young noblewoman, Caroline Beaufort, from poverty and later marries her. Their first child, Victor, is indulged but morally guided. When Victor is 5, Caroline adopts Elizabeth Lavenza, an orphan of Milanese origin, describing her as a pretty present. Elizabeth becomes Victor's cherished more than sister, symbolizing beauty, innocence, and later, idealized love. Victor's childhood friend Henry Clerval contrasts with him, imaginative, compassionate, and drawn to stories of heroism. Victor, in contrast, becomes absorbed in forbidden studies. He discovers the works of Cornelius Agrippa, Paracelsus, and Albertus Magnus, medieval alchemists who promise mastery over life and death. When he witnesses lightning shatter an oak tree, he becomes fascinated by electricity's power, a moment foreshadowing the later spark of life. Chapters 3 to 5, The Creation. At 17, tragedy interrupts his idyll. Caroline dies of scarlet fever, contracting it while nursing Elizabeth. On her deathbed, she blesses the future union of Victor and Elizabeth a final act of maternal affection that will later haunt Victor. At the University of Ingolstadt, Victor meets two professors, and Crump, who ridicules his outdated alchemical studies, and M. Waldman, who restores his enthusiasm by describing the chemist as a man who penetrates into the recesses of nature and shows how she works in her hiding places. Victor becomes obsessed with the principle of life. After 2 years of feverish, isolated labor, he succeeds. He animates lifeless matter. But when the creature opens its dull yellow eye, Victor recoils in horror. Its yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. The creator, appalled by his own success, flees his laboratory. In delirium, Victor wanders the streets until Henry Clerval arrives to begin his own studies. Seeing his friend's wasted state, Clerval nurses Victor through months of illness. When Victor recovers, a letter from Elizabeth brings home news of peace and domestic affection, contrasting with his unnatural pursuits. Chapters 6-8. The Murders of William and Justine. The calm ends abruptly when Victor's father writes of William Frankenstein's murder. The family's youngest, William, has been strangled near Geneva. Returning home, Victor sees a flash of lightning illuminate a figure on a mountain, his creature. He realizes with horror that his creation has murdered his brother. Yet the blame falls on Justine Moritz, the family's gentle servant, because a miniature portrait of Caroline found on William's body has been discovered in her pocket. Victor remains silent, knowing no one would believe his tale. At the trial, Justine's confession coerced by her confessor seals her fate. Her calm acceptance of death stands in moral contrast to Victor's cowardice. When she is executed, Victor calls himself the true murderer. This double tragedy marks his irreversible descent into guilt and despair. Seeking solace, he turns to the sublime landscapes of Mont Blanc and the valley of Chamonix, where nature's grandeur momentarily eases his torment. Yet, even amid glaciers and roaring torrents, peace eludes him. Chapters 9-16. The Monster's Tale. On the glacier of Montanvert, Victor encounters the creature. Expecting a violent confrontation, he is startled when it pleads for understanding. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel. The creature's eloquence shocks Victor, who agrees to hear its story inside a cave on the mountain. The creature recounts its awakening, confusion, hunger, pain, and delight at fire's warmth. Rejected by villagers, stoned and beaten, it hides in a hovel adjoining a cottage inhabited by the de Lacy family, the blind old father, his son Felix, and daughter Agatha. Through patient observation, the creature learns language and emotion. Seeing their kindness, it secretly gathers firewood for them. And new arrival Safi, an Arabian woman, becomes the catalyst for its education, as Felix teaches Safi French using ruins of empires. The creature learns human history, discovering both mobile ideals and the strange system of human society. It understands injustice and tyranny, and also its own isolation. Reading Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, and the Sorrows of Werther, it identifies with both Adam and Satan, torn between yearning for affection and burning resentment. One day, the creature decides to reveal itself to the blind de Lacy, reasoning that the old man's lack of sight might allow him to judge by words, not appearance. De Lacy listens kindly, but when Felix and Agatha return, they drive the creature away in horror. Fury and despair consume it. Finding the cottage empty the next day, it burns it down in vengeance. It then travels toward Geneva, learning that it is Victor's creation from papers it found in Victor's coat. When it meets a young boy, William, and hears the name Frankenstein, rage overcomes it. You shall be my first victim. It strangles him and plants the locket on Justine, sealing her fate. The creature then makes a demand. Victor must create a female companion, promising that together they will quit the neighborhood of man and dwell in the vast wilds of South America. Chapters 17-20. The Unfinished Mate. Victor, torn between moral horror and responsibility, reluctantly agrees. His father urges him to marry Elizabeth, but Victor insists on traveling first to England to gather materials. Accompanied by Clerval, he tours Oxford, London, and then Scotland. Clerval rejoices in cultural beauty. Victor broods over his grim task. On the remote Orkney Islands, Victor establishes a solitary workshop. As he pieces together the second creature, he imagines a race of devils overrunning the earth. One night, seeing the monster's ghastly face at the window, Victor tears apart his half-finished work. The monster howls in agony and vows revenge. I shall be with you on your wedding night. To destroy the evidence, Victor fills a basket with the remains, rows out to sea, and casts them overboard. When a storm drives him ashore in Ireland, he is seized by locals who accuse him of murder. The body found on the beach is Henry Clerval. Victor collapses into convulsions, haunted by guilt. After months in prison, the court clears him, for there is no proof. Yet the loss of his friend extinguishes his spirit. His father comes to bring him home, and Victor now believes the monster's threat means Elizabeth will die if he marries her. Chapters 21 to 23. The Final Tragedies. Back in Geneva, Victor's health is frail. Elizabeth's gentle letters express her worry. She senses he hides a secret. Alphonse presses for their marriage, hoping it will restore joy. Victor, believing the monster seeks his death, resolves to marry Elizabeth and confront my enemy. They wed and travel to Lake Como for their honeymoon. Yet the tranquility is shattered. On the wedding night, a piercing scream resounds. Elizabeth has been strangled. Victor glimpses the monster at the window, grinning. He fires, but misses. Returning home, Victor finds his father dead from grief. Alone and maddened, Victor swears vengeance. I devote myself to your destruction. The Arctic pursuit. Driven by hatred, Victor pursues the monster across Europe and into the frozen north. Their chase becomes mythic, hunter and prey, creator and creation, bound by obsession. Victor recounts how he often glimpsed the monster ahead, mocking him, leaving food to sustain his pursuit, a cruel reversal of their roles. Eventually exhausted and near death, Victor's sledge breaks apart on the ice, leading to his rescue by Walton's crew, bringing the narrative full circle. Victor warns Walton against ambition. Seek happiness in tranquility and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science. Soon after, his strength fails, and he dies. Walton's next letters describe the crew's fear as the ship remains trapped in ice. They beg to turn back, and despite Victor's fiery speech urging perseverance, Walton relents. When the ice breaks, they prepare to return to England. Before departure, Walton records one final scene. Entering Victor's cabin, he finds the monster mourning over its creator's body. Its face, wrinkled with anguish, expresses genuine sorrow. O Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? It claims it never wanted evil but was made wicked by misery, calling itself a fallen angel. It vows to die. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. With that, it leaps into the darkness of the polar sea, leaving its fate unknown. Analysis of key themes. Shelley's Frankenstein weaves science, morality, and romantic idealism into a Gothic meditation on human ambition and alienation. 1. The dangers of knowledge. Victor's quest to pour a torrent of light into our dark world echoes Enlightenment ideals but leads to ruin. The novel critiques scientific hubris, the Promethean impulse to rival divine creation. 2. Isolation. Both Victor and his creatures suffer isolation. Victor from human contact, the creature from human acceptance. Each reflects the other's loneliness, suggesting that obsession with knowledge and rejection of empathy produce the same desolation. 3. Nature versus nurture. The creature begins benevolent and turns violent only after rejection. Shelley challenges deterministic ideas of monstrous nature, implying that cruelty is socially produced. 4. Parenthood and responsibility. Victor's abandonment of his child constitutes the novel's moral core. His failure to love or educate his creation transforms potential good into destructive rage. 5. Narrative framing. Walton's letters, Victor's tale, and the creature's embedded story mirror one another, creating a structure of reflection and warning. Each narrator begins with ambition and ends in disillusionment. 6. Romantic sublime. Nature in Frankenstein both heals and terrifies. The Alps and the Arctic function as sublime backdrops to the human soul's grandeur and fragility. Frankenstein achieves the tragic symmetry Shelley intended. The creator and the creation destroy each other, bound by shared suffering. The monster's final words transform it from villain to victim, forcing readers to question where the true monstrosity lies, in the creature's acts or in humanity's failure to show compassion. Shelley's vision remains prophetic. 2 centuries later, her warning still echoes in every new frontier of science, that discovery without empathy and creation without conscience will always end in ruin. The major conflict in Frankenstein revolves around Victor's inability to understand that his actions have repercussions. Victor focuses solely on his own goals and fails to see how his actions might impact other individuals. The monster functions as the most stark reminder of how Victor has failed to take responsibility for his actions in defying the laws of nature. The first signs of the conflict appear when Victor throws himself into his studies at the University of Ingolstadt, neglecting his family and fiancée. The conflict deepens when, having succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life, Victor becomes obsessed with creating a monster. He does not stop to think about what the experiences of that monster might be like, nor is he fazed by the fact that he ignores his family to pursue his work. He is so obsessed with his ambition that he does not consider anything else. The rising action of his reckless quest to create life comes to a peak when, immediately after animating the monster, he reacts with horror and disgust and runs from the room. This incident illustrates the conflict between Victor and moral responsibility. He has been responsible for making the monster and bringing him to life, but when he doesn't like the result, he simply rejects it. The tension increases when Victor learns of the death of his brother William and the false accusation against Justine. The murder creates another situation in which Victor can choose to act or fail to take responsibility. He heightens the conflict by allowing Justine to be executed, rather than disclosing what he knows about the monster. The conflict is heightened further when the monster meets up with Victor amidst the mountain peaks and tells him the story of all the suffering he has experienced, as well as his loneliness and alienation. The meeting between the monster and his creator is another moment where Victor could potentially turn away from his selfish path. The plot suggests potential resolution when Victor reluctantly agrees to fashion a mate for the monster in exchange for the two of them going somewhere remote. However, the conflict is reignited when Victor is too disgusted to carry out this plan and destroys the female monster before completing it. Yet again, he doesn't think about what this reckless choice will mean, even though the monster vows revenge. Victor is genuinely surprised when his friend Henry Clerval is killed, and then again when his fiancée Elizabeth is also murdered, despite the monster's explicit statements that he is now dedicated to making Victor's life a living hell by depriving him of everyone he loves. The murder of Elizabeth shifts the conflict into its final stage, in which Victor vows to hunt down and kill the monster in revenge for all the deaths. This vow partially resolves the conflict in that it gives the monster what he wants. He now has the total attention of his creator, and the fates of the two individuals are interlocked. After Victor pursues the monster around the world, he arrives in the Arctic and encounters Walton, bringing the story full circle back the point at which the narration switched from Walton to Victor. Victor's travels have exhausted him so much that he dies aboard the ship after relaying his tale, his role in the story fulfilled. The novel climaxes with Walton finding the monster in the room, gazing at Victor's dead body and weeping. Victor never acknowledges the role he played in creating the chaos and tragedy that resulted in the deaths of several innocent people, as well as the torment of his creation. Unlike Victor, the monster expresses remorse and self-loathing, suggesting that he ultimately has become more human than his creator. Walton finally gets to see and hear the monster from his own perspective, and he is able to feel a mixture of curiosity and compassion. The falling action of the novel quickly concludes with the monster explaining his plan to kill himself, then setting off alone to carry out his plan. Emotion, individual conscience, and nature versus social order in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein 1818 is far more than a Gothic horror story. It is a profound exploration of human emotion, moral responsibility, and the tension between the individual and society. Written during the Romantic period, the novel reflects that era's fascination with emotion, imagination, and the natural world, while also anticipating modern concerns about science, ethics, and alienation. Through the intertwined stories of Victor Frankenstein and his creature, Shelley dramatizes how emotional repression, failure of conscience, and conflict between nature and social order lead to tragedy. The novel becomes a study of what happens when human feeling and moral awareness are subordinated to ambition, pride, and social prejudice. Emotion and the consequences of its suppression. Emotion lies at the center of Frankenstein, its vitality, repression, and destruction. Shelley's romantic contemporaries such as Wordsworth and Coleridge celebrated emotion as the essence of humanity. Yet in Victor Frankenstein, Shelley portrays a man who rejects emotion in favor of intellect and scientific ambition, leading to moral and psychological collapse. From the beginning, Victor's passion for knowledge isolates him from human feeling. He recalls, "My father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors, but Victor's obsession with forbidden knowledge soon becomes pathological. My heart often sickened at the work of my hands, but my enthusiasm was checked by anxiety." This emotional disconnection is crucial. Victor suppresses empathy and compassion, qualities that might have made him pause before creating life without responsibility. His emotional blindness is symbolized in the moment he abandons the creature, fleeing with horror and disgust from his own creation. The image of Victor running from his trembling, newborn being captures Shelley's critique of intellectual arrogance devoid of emotional humanity. In contrast, the creature begins as a being of pure emotional sensitivity. When he first experiences nature, he describes it in the language of innocent wonder. "I felt light, and hunger, and thirst, and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me." He learns love and beauty by observing the de Lacy family, weeping at their tenderness and trying to imitate their goodness. However, when society rejects him violently, his capacity for emotion turns into rage and despair. His lament, "I am malicious because I am miserable," encapsulates the novel as central emotional truth. Neglect and rejection corrupt the heart. Shelley thus makes emotion not merely a theme but the moral compass of humanity. When denied, both creator and creation become monsters. Individual conscience and moral responsibility. Running through Frankenstein is the question of individual conscience, the inner sense of moral duty that ought to guide action. Both Victor and the creature struggle with conscience, but Victor's failure to act on it drives the tragedy. Victor's conscience warns him even before the creature comes to life. In the laboratory scene he admits, "Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I shunned my fellow creatures as if I had been guilty of a crime. This moment shows that he feels moral unease, but suppresses it in pursuit of glory. His later guilt after the deaths of William, Justine, and Elizabeth reflects his tormented conscience, but his remorse never matures into moral accountability. He continually insists that he is a victim of fate. I was the true murderer, yet he takes no responsibility for creating the being that kills others. His conscience is reactive, not reflective. Shelley uses Victor to illustrate how moral evasion, not moral failure, defines true monstrosity. The creature, in contrast, develops conscience despite being denied guidance or acceptance. After reading Paradise Lost, he recognizes his own moral duality. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. He feels remorse for killing William, and for framing Justine. I, the miserable and abandoned, am an abortion to be spurned at, and kicked, and trampled on. Unlike Victor, he seeks understanding and reconciliation, asking his creator for a companion, not vengeance. It is only after Victor destroys the promised mate that the creature's conscience gives way to vengeance. Shelley thus reverses expectations. The so-called monster demonstrates greater moral awareness than the man who made him. Ultimately, both characters' fates dramatize Shelley's warning that the neglect of conscience, either through obsession or resentment, leads to self-destruct. In the final Arctic pursuit, Victor dies consumed by revenge, while the creature, remorseful, resolves to destroy himself, declaring, "He is dead who called me into being. When I die, I am well satisfied." Here, conscience asserts itself too late. But it restores some moral balance. The creature's emotional repentance contrasts sharply with Victor's moral blindness. Nature versus social order. Shelley also frames her moral drama within a conflict between nature and social order, a hallmark of romantic thought. Nature in Frankenstein represents purity, healing, and truth, while human society represents prejudice, ambition, and corruption. The opposition between the two worlds shakes both Victor's and the creature's fates. For Victor, nature is both refuge and rebuke. After William and Justine's deaths, he seeks solace in the sublime landscape of the Alps. These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. The grandeur of Mont Blanc and the serenity of Lake Geneva restored his emotions temporarily, reflecting the romantic belief that nature can purify the troubled soul. Yet Victor never learns from nature's harmony. His obsession with dominating it through science persists. When he later isolates himself in the Orkney Islands to create the female creature, the wild landscape mirrors his inner turmoil, dark, stormy, and barren. Shelley's nature imagery thus acts as a moral mirror. When Victor violates the natural order, nature itself becomes hostile. For the creature, nature is initially a nurturing mother. He describes how he survived by drinking from the pure stream and taking shelter in a low hovel. But as human society rejects him, even nature turns cold. The burning of his hut after the de Lacys drive him away marks his expulsion from both natural and social belonging. Society, meanwhile, operates by appearance and exclusion. The villagers who attack him without reason represent social order based on fear, not justice. Shelley thus critiques a civilization that values conformity and hierarchy over empathy and natural feeling. At the end, the frozen Arctic wasteland where Victor and the creature pursue each other symbolizes the final triumph of desolation, a world stripped of warmth, emotion, and moral life. In this sense, Shelley's nature versus society conflict becomes a larger allegory for humanity's alienation from both natural goodness and moral conscience.